Welcome back to the Kingdom Colony. This is Akatrina Krista. We are going to understand very many things, where we came from, what we can do, and where we are going. Thank you for listening to our messages. Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, the Kingdom Colony, for more messages and for more videos. Don't forget to hit that notification bell. See you on the next upload. Hello everyone, shalom, peace be with you. How are you doing? Thank you for listening to our messages. Thank you for tuning in. This is Akatrina Krista. Welcome back to the Kingdom Colony. We are here today. We are talking about the principles of creation, the principles that God used to create everything that we see and the things that we don't see. We are going to understand very many things, where we came from, what we can do, and where we are going. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell to get the new videos that we're gonna upload. And you can follow us on Instagram. You can follow us on Twitter, the Kingdom Colony. If you're on Instagram, the Kingdom Colony. Let us go straight away to the principles of creation. The principles of creation, we are going to be in Genesis chapter 1 and 2. The principles that God used to create everything. We are in Genesis chapter 1. We are going to try and finish this chapter because this chapter is loaded. There's too much in this chapter. The things we are going to understand, the things your ears have never heard of. You are going to listen to things and understand the things that you have never thought of. Principle is something that you cannot change. However much you try, you cannot change it. It's the principle, and it's inherent sometimes in creation. We are talking about the principle that God used to create everything that we see. God's principles, they cannot change. He followed these principles to produce everything that we see and the things that we don't see. We are going to read from Genesis chapter 1 and to the rest of the chapter. Then I will come back later and explain. Okay, you are going to need a pen to write this down because you're going to need them. Or you can download this message and you can listen to it a couple of times to get what I'm trying to mean and to get this message. Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, verse 3, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light was that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. Verse 5, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. I'm reading from the KJV. Verse 6, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. Verse 8, and God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together upon one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. 10, and God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the water he called the seas. And God saw that it was good. Verse 11, and God said, let the earth bring forth grass, and the herbs yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after its kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day and from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. Verse 15, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. 16, and God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. 17, and God set them in the firmament of the heaven, and to give upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. Verse 19, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. 20, and God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creatures and earth life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. Gold. 21, and God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the fall multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the 5th day. 24. And God said, Let the earth bring forth the living creature, and the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping things, and beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. 25. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth and his kind. And God saw that it was good. Verse 26. And God said, Let us make man in our own image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them. And God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the living things that move upon the earth. 29. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed to you, it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. And God saw, 31, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the 6th day. That's our chapter, Genesis 1. And in this simple chapter, it's where we find all the mysteries of creation. Everything that God did is in this Genesis chapter 1. Another time we are going to study about Genesis chapter 2, because they go together. These are the very chapters that are perfect in the Bible, because in these chapters it's where the God's perfect will is being established. It's why we don't find the devil in these chapters. We find the God's purpose, the God's free will. So we are on the principles of creation, and we are going to write these things down. I have 7 principles that you are going to write down, that we are going to talk about today. We are on the principles that God used to create the world. And when you read the Bible in Genesis chapter 1, you will find these words, and God said. Verse 3, and God said. Verse 6, and God said. Verse 11, and God said. Verse 14, and God said. Verse 26, and God said. This statement also explains the pre-existence of Jesus Christ in Genesis. It's why we find Jesus in Genesis, because here God was going to release the word, and we know that when John was going to introduce Jesus Christ into the world, he called him the Word. So here we see the existence of Jesus Christ in Genesis. And God said, when God was going to create the world, he created the world with his word. His word is powerful. It's so powerful, and he's so faithful to his word. So when God said, let there be this, it had to happen, because his word is power. We are going to first list these principles down. The first one is idea. The second one, God decide what he wants. The third one, why he wants it, or the purpose of a product or the purpose of a thing. Then the fourth one, he decide the material that he want that product to be made out of. Then number 5, he speaks to the material what he wants. Number 6, whatever he speaks to consists of the same material or components or characteristics of the product. Number 7, whatever comes out of the material has to remain attached to the material for it to live or to feed on the material where it came from. Let us apply these principles here in our verses. We are on Genesis chapter 1. Let us start from the 11th chapter. It says, and God said, let the earth bring forth the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 11, it's where we find that God is creating the vegetation. And look at where he aimed his speech. He aimed his speech on the earth. He wanted these plants to come from the earth. He did not aim the speech at himself or to the firmament. He wanted these things to be from the earth. So he talked to the earth, or he spoke to the earth. He said, let the earth bring forth vegetation, each of its kind. So now these things, if you are to study the plants, you will find that plants is 100% dirt, because it's where it came from. When you are eating an apple, or when you leave the apple on the ground and you come back like 3 weeks later or 1 month, you'll find that the apple has turned into dust. It's because it's where it came from. So if you apply the other principles, it says that God decided what he wants first, and what comes out of the material consists of the same essence or of the same characteristics. So plants are 100% dust, because it's where they came from. If you do not need to kill a plant when you get it out of the soil. It has to die, because you remember the principle says whatever comes out of the product has to remain attached to the product in order for it to live. So plants, for them to live, they have to remain attached to the earth, because it's where they came from. They feed from the earth. When you separate them from the earth, they will have to die, because you have separated them from their source. Verse 14, here God is going to create the lights to rule over the day and rule over the night. And remember, look at where he aims his speech. He did not speak to himself. He spoke to the firmament. He wants this thing to be from the firmament. And remember, what is in the firmament is the gases. The firmament, the heaven, is filled with gases. So when God spoke, let there be lights, all the gases, they came together and formed this sun that we see. The sun we see is 100% gases. Remember, what comes out of the material consists of the same essence. So the sun came from the firmament, and the firmament is filled with gases. So the sun is 100% gases. The sun we see is 100% gases. That's why even when the stars fall, it burns and turns back into gases. So in order for the sun to live, it has to remain attached to the firmament for it to live. Remember the principle. What comes out of the material has to remain attached to that material in order for it to live. So in order for the sun to live, it has to remain attached to the firmament, because it's where it came from, and the sun comprises of the same, or consists of the same material where it came from. And when we look at the verses 20, here God is going to create the fish, the whales, and everything that we see that lives within the water. So what does God do? He speaks to the waters. So here God is going to create the fish and all the whale. And remember, in order for the fish to live, it has to remain attached to the waters. When you pull the fish out of the water, it has to die. Why? Because it's where it came from. The fish came from waters. It has to remain attached in the waters for it to live. So if you remove it from the water, automatically it has to die. That is a principle. And when you start the fish is 100% water, because it's where it came from, and in order for it to live, it has to remain attached to it. You see how God's works are so amazing. There are principles. You don't guess, you don't do this and this. There's a principles that I have to follow to have a successful life. Now the big one is this one. Genesis chapter 1 verses 26, and God said, let us make man in our own image and in our own likeness. Oh, here is the mystery. When God wanted to create man, he said, this one is not going to be dirt. This one is not going to be the gases. It's not going to consist of the gases. It's not going to come from the earth. It's not going to come from the heavens. He aimed his speech to himself. God spoke to himself. I want him to come from myself. And God wanted to create man. He spoke to himself. Remember, the principle says God decides what he wants first. So now here in Genesis chapter 1 verses 26, we see that God now is going to create man. And he says, let us make man. This statement refers to the Trinity of God. Here he's talking about the God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So when he said, let us create man in our own image. They were working together as one. So here God is creating man, and he's creating him from himself. God spoke to himself. He did not speak to anything. He wants this man to consist of the same material like God is. He spoke to himself. He spoke to his spirit. Remember, God is a spirit. So when he said, let us make this one, let us make man in our own image and in our own likeness, he is trying to mean that this one, I want him to be like me. So remember, whatever comes out of the material consists of the same material. So here God spoke to himself, let us make man, which means man is 100% God. Why? Because man came from God. God is a spirit, so man is also a spirit. God breathed the spirit that he has made into this dead body that he created from dust, and that's why when you die, you have to live, because you don't have the dust. In order to live here on earth, you have to be with the body. In fact, the word image there, it doesn't mean to look like, it means the moral and spiritual character, which means men, you came from God. And remember, whatever comes from the material consists of the same material where it came from. So if you came from God, which means you have the same essence as God has, you have the same characteristics as God has. So if you want to know yourself, you want to study, if you want to know who you are, you have to study God. Why? Because it's where you came from. We came from God. God spoke to himself, let us make man. And remember, God is a spirit. And there are some characteristics about God that you will find when you study God. So if you want to understand who you are, where you came from, you have to understand God. You have to study God, because it's where we came from. And where we came from, we have to remain attached. This principle says whatever comes from the material has to remain attached to that material in order for it to live. So we need God to live. Why? Because it's where we came from. We cannot live without God. We came from God. So we have to remain attached to God in order for us to live. That's why when Adam fell in Genesis chapter 3, he fell from dominion. He lost his rulership. The connection was cut off from where he came from. Remember, like a fish cannot live without water, also man cannot live without God. Why? Because man needs God, because it's where he came from. In order for you to live, you have to remain attached to God to live, because it's where you came from. Like a fish cannot live without water, like plants cannot live without the earth, also man cannot live without God. This also tells you where we came from. We came from God, and we are spirits, because God is a spirit. So in order to live, you have to remain attached to God. Jesus said, without me you can do nothing. Without me you can do nothing. He was not bragging about himself. No, he knew, because we came from him. So he was telling us that without me you can't do nothing. Like a fish out of water, it cannot do nothing. It struggles to live, and eventually it dies. So without Christ you cannot do anything. Why? We need him, because it's where we came from. So you have to remain, you have to keep the relationship. That's why I tell you, the youth, you have to accept Jesus Christ to be your savior. Why? Because you need him to live. You need him to live, because it's where we came from. You have to keep that relationship. You cannot have it without Jesus Christ, because remember, he's the way, the truth, and the life. In order for you to live, you have to come to Jesus Christ. He's the one that gives us life. His words are life. He gives us life through his words. That's why he says, my words are life, and they that listen to them, they have life, and they that follow them, they will not stumble. We need Jesus. God gives himself the title of Father. He's the Father of everything. Why? Because it's where everything came from. He's our Father. We call him our Father. It's where we came from. The word Father means Abba in Hebrew. It's the word Abba, and it means source and sustainer. So God sustains us, because it's where we came from. And in order for us to live, we have to remain attached to him. When you separate from God, you have to die. And even death, remember when Adam fell in Genesis chapter 3, he did not fall from heaven. He fell from dominion. He lost connection with his source. So now what he needs is to be reconnected back, is to be reconciled back to the source. So you can live here on earth while you are dead, because death to God is not the physical body. Remember, when you read in Genesis chapter 2, verse 15, it says, if you disobey me, or if you eat from this fruit, you will surely die. And we see here Adam living 930 years on earth. What did God mean? Death to God does not mean the death of the physical body. It's the separation from His spirit and man's spirit. If you are separated from God's spirit, you are dead to God. So you can be living here on earth, but while you are dead. Why? Because you don't have the Spirit of God. You have lost the connection. You have lost the connection with the source. You are on your own. It's like a fish living out of the water. You will find your way to live without your source, and our life becomes hard. So you see the mysteries of creation, how God is a God of principles. You see how principled He is. You see all the principles that He has used to create everything. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Kingdom Colony. You can follow us on Instagram, The Kingdom Colony. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on the Facebook. You can follow us on Facebook, The Kingdom Colony, for more messages and for more videos. And don't forget to hit the notification bell. Thank you so much. This is Agathon Krista. See you on the next upload, and keep tuned.